See. All right, it's time to get our Nerd Night underway. So thank you for being here, nerds. Happy Valentine's Day. We love you, nerds. Mandy, if you came up here and I made all these nerds do something, would you take a picture of it? Come up here. All right, nerds, we have super nerd extreme photographer Mandy Penn. So what I would like all of you to do is make your little hearts with your hands, and she's going to take a picture of all of you. All right. Thank you, nerds, for indulging me in our Valentine's Day love. All right. So we're here at Nerd Night. So Nerd Night has our tagline, and it's be there and be square. But in the early 2000s, it had a bit of a shift, and they would say that it was more like the Discovery Channel with beer. But by show of hands, how many of you have cable anymore? Yeah. Yeah, so now like having the Discovery Channel is not something that we really have. So now what they call it is like boozy TED Talks. So thank you for having that beer, a whole bunch of beer over there. Fantastic. That's what we're here. We're here to drink and have a good time together. So my name is Flip Awesome Aguilera, and this over here is my beautiful wife Maritza. This is us at Nerd Night in Miami. Oops, let's go back. See that? There's the back button I was telling you guys about. So this was us in Miami, a day that I gave a Nerd Night talk, and that's the day that I asked her to marry me. So how fun is that? So Nerd Night is in over 100 cities across the world. So if you want to go nerd out with fellow nerds in other places, whenever traveling gets more effective and efficient again, go visit a Nerd Night and go learn with some other nerds all across the world. So how many of you, by show of hands, are here for the first time? All right, give yourselves a hand. Woo! Now, I know what all you new people are thinking. Tell me if I'm psychic or not. You're thinking, if I was in a bar full of drunk people, what would I present? How many? Yes, you're not new. So if you'd like to present, you can send us an email at nerdnitecos@gmail.com, or you can tap either one of us in the shoulder. You can tap Erica, somebody that'll get you to us, and we will get you in the pipeline to get you on this very main, beautiful stage of Coati and get your idea out there to the nerd community. So you can follow, like, review, share us on the Facebook and on the gram. We'd really love if you do that, so you let other nerds know that what we're doing is super fun. And this is our website that we really don't do much. But if you wanted to see when I asked her to marry me, you can go there, and it's got the YouTube of when that happened. So you can check that out. So let's put our hands together for Coati for letting us do this here. Thank you guys very much. We appreciate you for believing in our nerdy community and letting us do this. And thank you, Colorado Springs. You guys are the best. Thank you very much. So tonight we've got our three presenters. We have Mission I'm Possible by Gieo Pensoneault. We have presentation number 2, Discovering the Bluegrass Boys by Garrett Goggins. And presentation number 3, Theio Carey. I don't know. That. He's gonna nerd it out for us and let us know exactly how to say it the right way. And that is by Bideau of the Garden of the Gods Visitor Center, one of our local jewels that we have here. So with that, let's begin. Gieo, are you ready to nerd out with our nerdy community? All right, everybody, let's welcome Gieo up to the stage.
Not that button. That button. So, yes, I'm Gieo Pensoneault, and I am a nerd. As you can tell, this is not a costume. This is what I look like on a normal day. My topic, like I said, is Mission Impossible. And when Flip asked me to speak, it was about 5 days ago. And how many people here have seen the movie with Jim Carrey, The Yes Man? Show of hands. So in The Yes Man, if you haven't seen it before, Jim Carrey, his character, he has a very drab life, and he hates going to work until he goes to this motivational event, and he becomes a yes man, and he gets magically transformed to say yes to everything. So when I first met Flip, which was, like I said, 5 days ago, and he said to me, do you want to do a talk at Nerd Night? And I was like, yes. And then 2 seconds later, he says, do you want to come over for dinner tonight and talk about it? And I, like I said, I just met him, and I was like, yes. And everything was great. I met with Flip and his wife. We had a wonderful dinner and everything. And I was all about the yes. And I went to sleep that night. I woke up the next morning, and I'm looking up at the ceiling, and I'm like, there is no way. There is no way. And I'm thinking to myself, no. I just met them. They're not going to be, I could easily say no. But then all of a sudden, I got the idea for the talk. And the thing is that, a talk like this, it can take 4 weeks. That's roughly what they, say. And this is true in life. Something could take you 4 weeks to do. It could take you 4 days to do. Or it could take you 4 hours to do. And so that's, like I said, the kind of the focus of my talk tonight. And I've got 3 different kind of examples of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And so the first one is fire walking. The first 2 topics are things that I've done personally. So fire walking, ice bathing, which is an interesting thing, which I've also done. And the third thing is a billion-person idea. And you may be familiar with this lady here. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about her story. But really what I'm talking about is not so much motivation. It's really the mechanics of how to do things that are seemingly impossible. But I want to give you the warning, do not try this at home. So there's really 3 key areas. And like I said, this is not motivational, this is not made up stuff, this is actually the mechanics. If you're interested, you've got an idea of something that's really extraordinary, you want to know how to do it, this is how it's done. So the first master key of doing anything extraordinary is you have to have the energy for it. And a lot of people deal with the opposite of having energy, which is being depressed. It's a common thing, especially going through the pandemic, and that's the opposite of having energy. So if you want to do something really extraordinary, the first thing is having energy or generating energy. And one of my mentors is Brendan Bouchard, and he says, metaphorically, that the power plant doesn't have energy, the power plant makes energy. And we are the power plant. And so the question is, how is it that we generate that energy? How is it actually done? Some people think food is the way that energy is generated. But, what was it like the last time you had the Thanksgiving meal, and then you're like, oh, I'm so stuffed. And then afterwards somebody says, oh, how about a piece of pie? Oh, okay. And then you just promptly crashed, right? So food is not the source of energy. The best way I can describe energy is this word peak state. And one of my early mentors in life who also taught me fire walking was Tony Robbins. And if anybody has ever come into contact with him or watched him, some people get really annoyed because he does this thing to make you move. And some people think, why is he doing that? And it's to get you into a peak state. And what a peak state is, it's a state where you could be calm, but you're also very energized. You're focused. It often comes out of having a challenge. So counter to the belief, like sometimes you're thinking about doing something very challenging, you take on a challenge in life and you actually step into it, that challenge will bring energy. And so my example of somebody who has mastered this process of peak state is Wim Hof. How many people here are familiar with Wim Hof? So he's a global phenomenon now, and he's also known as the Iceman because Wim Hof has discovered the technique, the process of diving into freezing cold water. He also has done the absolute, what seems like impossible. He has been in a tank of ice, I think for up to 2 hours. Totally impossible, but he's an ordinary person, just like you and I. And one of the elements of how to create the peak state is kind of captured in this quote by Nietzsche. It says, "He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how." And so the story of how Wim Hof discovered his why is quite a tragic story, and it's not uncommon that people discover their big why in life through tragedy, through challenges, through trauma. And in Wim's experience, or his life, this is Wim's wife, and they met when they were very young. He described her as the love of his life, and they had 3 children together. And there was something tragically wrong that became apparent at one point. 2 o'clock in the morning, his wife had been dealing with depression for a long time, and she totally unexpectedly gave her children a kiss at 2 o'clock in the morning, and then jumped off an 8-story building that they lived in. And this, like I said, was the love of his life, and he was then left to figure out what to do, and he was committed to those children. And I don't know the story about how he first discovered, but this is what he discovered. By jumping into freezing cold water, it does amazing things. It immediately dissolves depression. You cannot jump into freezing cold water and still be depressed. So he discovered that. And it's not just a momentary thing. The effect lasts for a while, and there's many other phenomenal effects that freezing cold water has. And some of those elements now he teaches people all over the world. He's taught now millions of people how to overcome depression, how to overcome all kinds of physical, medical challenges. And some of the elements of that he teaches is the fastest way to get out of a depressed state, or even if you're just a little bit down, is to move your body. So you don't have to jump into cold water, but movement and then breath. Breath is the key to what he teaches, a certain kind of breathing, and then making sounds. So that is master key number 1. Key number 2 is belief. And these are in order. If you want to do something extraordinary, this is the second thing. So looking at your beliefs. If I said to you, we're going to go outside right now and walk on some hot coals, how many people believe that you could do that? Good. You're probably people that have already done it. No? Okay. But belief is where it starts. Because as Henry Ford says, if you believe you can or you believe you can't, you're right in both circumstances. So belief is the core of the whole thing. It's one of the core things that makes the possibility of the firewalk possible. And I got pulled into this world when I was 22, and Tony Robbins was kind of just getting going with his whole thing. But the firewalk was the center of the attraction. And when you do the firewalk, it kind of metaphorically makes you like, oh, I did that, what else could I do? But we hadn't done it yet. It was me and my girlfriend, the best friend, and his girlfriend. There was 4 of us. We went to a Tony Robbins event, and we learned about this. We learned about the power of beliefs and how beliefs are the most powerful driver, because we have this natural motivation to be consistent with what we believe. So even if what we believe is not true, our unconscious mind will support not only seeing that, but experiencing it. So my belief, at the time I was 22 years old, my belief was, based on what I saw, I'm 22, I didn't have any money, I'm totally broke, as my friends were, we didn't have jobs. And this Tony Robbins event was in Palm Springs. It cost $5,000 per person. And we decided we're committed, we're going to do it for all four of us. And we're going to somehow raise the $20,000 in 30 days. Totally broke, didn't have a job. And so we kind of took this idea on, like, oh, maybe that's not true. Maybe we can do it. And so we would get together every morning at 6:30 in my friend's basement. And we did this process that Tony taught us about masterminding. And we were like, somehow we're going to make this money. And we tried a lot of different things. And then all of a sudden one morning, my friend says, I got it. I got the idea how we're going to raise this $20,000. And we were all like on the edge of our seats. My friend was very persuasive. And we said, like, what is it? And he says, pumpkins. And we're like, pumpkins? And he's like, yes. It's getting on Halloween. We lived in New England at the time. We had pumpkin fields. Everybody needs a pumpkin. And so my friend is like, yep, we're going to sell pumpkins. The one thing I had that my dad had given me was an old broken down van. And so we were like, okay, we're going to give this a try. And we broke up. The gals did the residential neighborhoods, selling pumpkins door to door. And me and my friend took the business district. And we're doing okay. We're going, to these businesses, pumpkin underneath our arm. And we're doing all right. We're selling pumpkins. But one day, all of a sudden, I'm in downtown Springfield, Massachusetts, and I look at this giant bank tower. Somehow the idea came to me. Banks need pumpkins. They got these big display areas. It's coming on Halloween. So I just marched into the bank, the pumpkin underneath my arm, and I looked around for some kind eyes. I found this woman at a desk, and I walked up to her very confidently with my pumpkin underneath my arm. And before I could almost say anything, she's like, oh, are you selling decoration packages? And I was like, yes. And she's like, oh, well, you got to go see this guy, Joe, up on the 11th floor. He's the building manager. And I was like, great, didn't say much more to her. I charged up onto the elevator, and I think to myself, what would be in a decoration package? And so I'm thinking, we got to have some small packages, some medium-sized packages, some big packages. And by the time I got off the 11th floor, I had kind of worked it out in my mind. I walked through these glass doors into this guy's office. The secretary's there. She's like, yeah, they told me you were coming up. You're the Halloween package guy. And I walk into Joe's office, and he's like, yeah, I heard you're coming. And I just went, we got these packages, and we got a small one, a medium one, and a large one. We come in, we set them up. It's got pumpkins, it's got Indian corn, it's got, gourds, all this different stuff. The small package is this much, the big package, medium is this, and then the large package, which obviously you need, it's a big bank. It was like $400. So we went from selling pumpkins to selling these packages. And we also figured out that our ideal customers, if we wanted to sell packages, were more banks, more restaurants, car showrooms, and long story short, within 30 days, we didn't quite raise the $20,000, but we got ourselves close enough, and that close enough convinced some other people to lend us money. So the third master key is strategy. And I'm a coach and a business consultant myself. I learned this the hard way. Most people think when you're trying to do something that you tell them how to do it. You give them the instructions. That doesn't work at all, because the first two things, you've got to have the energy, you've got to have the belief. Once you got that, then you can go into strategy. And within neurolinguistic programming, which is what Tony taught us, and many other people I've studied with now, there's a methodology called modeling. And modeling is essentially a way to look at somebody, talk with somebody who has already done what you want to do, and then you model the very specific things. So I come from an entrepreneurial family. I'm very interested in business. It's quite passionate to me. And so that's the area I work. And to me, this is Sarah Blakely. She's the youngest billionaire, female billionaire in America. At 40 years old, developed the spandex idea into $1 billion business. They just recently sold it. A totally ordinary person. A totally ordinary person. She financed the entire thing out of her own pocket. She didn't go get venture capital. She had $5,000. She had certain skills, and she has certain ways that she looks at the world. And these are some of those things, and these are some of the questions that we ask in modeling. The first thing is, what do they believe? What do they believe about what's possible? Other things are, how do they use their body? Like you could be slumping along like this, but I guarantee you, yeah, Sarah Blakely uses her body very differently. And then some other questions like, okay, so their belief, what does that really mean? Tell me more about that. How do you know that it's true? And some of the meta-model things that we know from Sarah Blakely is that her dad was enormously influential in a very crazy way. Her dad would insist around the dinner table that he would ask the question, what mistake did you make today? And he insisted that she had to make some mistake. And again, it's very counterintuitive, but think about Thomas Edison the same way. Somebody asked to him, why did you keep working on this light bulb thing? You failed at it 2,000 times. And he's like, no, I just found 2,000 ways to cross off the possibility list. So again, it's very counterintuitive, especially in our culture. We're really taught, don't make a mistake, get the right answer. And that's often something that really gets in people's way. The second thing that she did, or one of the things she did, the tremendous faith. So she asked God for $1 billion idea. She prayed, she asked for an idea that would generate, that would be that big. She said it took 2 years for that idea to emerge. So that's some faith right there, but she asked for it. And the idea that came to her was this problem with the undergarments. She noticed it a big problem. A lot of people got this problem or had the problem. She come up with the idea and made it happen. The other thing that she did, and this is very key, was she created an entire movie in her mind of the whole thing, including the end. Including this very funny little story that she tells, which is how she met her husband. This is Jesse Itzler. He's also a phenomenal entrepreneur in his own right. But when she said that when she met him in Las Vegas, she took one look at him and she's like, that's the guy in my movie. She just met him randomly. Turns out that she had chartered a private jet. And when she showed up at the airport terminal, Jesse Itzler is the founder of NextJets. He was there. And she was like, you're definitely the guy in my movie. And they have a beautiful, beautiful family. So my question to you, as I wrap up here, is what's your movie? What's your movie that you have? If you don't have one, you can create one. And what are you called to say yes to? Because again, having that big why, that reason, that motivates you, that's what creates the energy. And I've been told I think I'm going to be opening it up for questions, but before I do, I want to offer you 2 gifts. And the first one is the thing that inspired us to sell those pumpkins. I talked about the mastermind. This is a quote from Goethe, and he says, whatever you can do or dream you can, begin it at once. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. And the biggest killer of dreams that I rally against is procrastination, or thinking that the idea has to take a long time to do. So I'm a killer of that idea. And Goethe was my inspiration for that. The second thing is that I do work as a business coach, consultant. This is my area of expertise. And if anybody has an idea that you're working on and you want to bounce that idea off, maybe talk about what might be standing in your way, you can connect with me, onetruecalling.net. I've got business cards as well, but I open up about a half hour, 45 minutes of time for people that really have something that they want to bring out into the world. That's what I got for you. So questions? Flip. What appetite? What? Oh, okay, so yeah, Flip, if I understand it right, so you're asking what is the appetite that I notice out in the world? That's a great question, because when it comes to having a very inspiring why, we live in some very unusual times right now. I don't know if you've noticed. And very unusual times call for ordinary people to step up and become extraordinary. It's the environment for that. And so this is the time right now to look and see what's a problem that you're interested in solving. Like I said, it could be coming out of a trauma. It could be coming out of a bad experience. Tony Robbins says something along the lines of, what if your worst day was actually your best day? So the world needs people to do extraordinary things like right now. And there's a ridiculous amount of opportunity because of the technology. People think that the world is messed up. And like I said, there's a lot of challenges, but the technology that connects us all together, I mean, geez Louise, it's never been a better time to do something big. Thank you.
Thank you, Gieo. All right, everyone. So, hello, I'm Maritza. And this is my lovely assistant, Flip. So, now comes one of my favorite times. Oh, other way. I'm going the wrong way. Nerd Night Trivia. What's love got to do with it? All right, so love-themed trivia. First question, hold on. Yes. Hold on, wait. Raise your hands like good little boys and girls, and I will call on you. Do not scream out the answer. Yes. What's up, guys? All right. Boop, boop. All right. What brain chemical is known as the cuddle or love hormone? This gentleman over here. Yes. So we've got a little prize for our trivia winners. Everyone gets one if you get a right answer. I keep on going the wrong way. It's this microphone. I'm used to having my headset. I don't like the microphone. All right, question number 2. What notorious gangster orchestrated the St. Valentine's Day massacre? We all know him. Raise your hands. This lady in the back. Yes! Yes! She gets a prize. Awesome. Mr. Al Capone. There it goes again. Boom. All right, and the last trivia question before we go on our break is, doesn't want to work for me. All right, what Walt Disney animated film was hyped as the most beautiful love story ever told? Yes! Beauty and the Beast! Awesome! All right, now, you have a few minutes to follow, like, review, share us on Facebook, Instagram, at Nerd Nite COS. and refill your drinks, go grab something to eat. And we will be back here with our second presenter of the night, Mr. Garrett Goggins, and we'll learn about some bluegrass music. So stay tuned.
All right, nerds, it's time to take our seats back again. Let's get settled back in. Hopefully you got whatever refills you needed. If you needed to order more food, hopefully you got all that in. But now it's time for our second presenter of the day. So with that, I would like to welcome Dr. Garrett Goggins to the stage, and he's going to tell us about bluegrass music. Let's put our hands together.
Oh, y'all just got into it and then we cut it off. Like Flip said, my name is Garrett Goggins, and tonight I'm going to attempt to introduce you to the Bluegrass Boys. Some of you might know who the Bluegrass Boys are, some of you might not, and that's okay. But those that do, I'm going to dive in a little bit into the prehistory of bluegrass music tonight, so hopefully we can get something new for everybody out there. I am going to preface this talk by saying that I am not a bluegrass guru. I do not sit and listen to this genre of music day in and day out every day of my life. And really the preferred genre of music that I like has alternative rock, a lot of alternative stuff. So you may be asking, why am I giving a talk on bluegrass? A little bit about me. So I would label myself as a musician, singer, songwriter, hobbyist. And what I mean by that is I play guitar, I have written songs, and I do sing. I just do that in the privacy of my own home where no one else can hear me. Music for me is an outlet that came about because my entire family has been involved in music in some form or fashion. The biggest one, though, would be my father. Before my sister and I were a twinkle in my dad's eye, he had a master's in music, he taught music in college, and he played trombone for the Atlanta Pops. So he had a pretty impressive musical career. He was also a major history buff, so I can recall many times listening to stories about his musical journey, the history of classic composers, other musicians, and other genres. And because he was also a good old Southern boy, the bluegrass I was bound to be introduced to it. It was just like a thing. The most interesting thing for me, though, with bluegrass is that there's a huge misrepresentation of it.
Look at my face, I got a destination. Where I belong. There ain't no time for hesitation.
So you may be thinking, how can there be a misrepresentation of something as undeniable as the sound of bluegrass? Well, today, what we label as bluegrass is not really that. It actually falls under another category called newgrass. In the 1970s, there was a hippie movement that got fascinated with the earthy sounds of the bluegrass music. And there were a couple bands that came out that spearheaded a new liberal way of producing the bluegrass sound. And one of those bands was the Newgrass Revival. And the thing about them is they just looked different. They were just a bunch of hippies on stage playing bluegrass music. But they had one member, Bella Fleck, that would lead that group and create a group of their own, the Bella Fleck and the Flecktones. And in the late 80s, early 90s, Bella Fleck would win numerous Grammys in his bluegrass compositions. He wasn't the only one, though. Alison Krauss came on the scene, and in the early 90s, she actually won Grammy for her bluegrass music as well. The point is that though these new interpretations, they were bringing in new sounds. They were bringing in new instruments to the bluegrass genre. Some bands were bringing in electric instruments like the bass, and some were bringing in drums and percussion as well. There are classically trained musicians out there now, like the members of the group Punch Brothers, and they have elevated that genre to a whole new different level with more jazz sounds and voices in their chords. The mandolin player, Chris Thiele of that group, he's making waves all over the place, not just with Punch Brothers, but he also is in a group called Nickel Creek, which was the song right before this, that was Nickel Creek, and he has a solo career as well. The thing about today is that we're also bringing in songs from other genres. So groups, indie folk groups like the Mumford & Sons and Judah and the Lion, they are creating songs that are being considered part of this Newgrass genre. So if this is Newgrass music, then what is bluegrass music? So bluegrass came into popularity when the Grand Ole Opry started broadcasting the old-fashioned sounds of Bill Monroe and the Bluegrass Boys. Monroe's instrumentation, his song choices, and his style of playing music was all backed by a deep history of bluegrass, but it was not going to be labeled bluegrass for many years after that. Any premature or just preliminary search on the history of bluegrass music, you are going to find the life and times of Bill Monroe. And that is because he is rightfully labeled as the father of bluegrass music. Monroe was born in Kentucky, the bluegrass state, to a very musical family. And he joked that he had to resign to playing the mandolin because his older siblings were already playing guitars, banjos, and fiddles. And the style of music that they were playing was the Appalachian old-time mountain music. They called it old-time music. And it was this old-time hillbilly music where Monroe got his start alongside with his brother, Charlie. Lost my train of thought there, Charlie. So they brought in a lot of different genres, though. So they had this mountain music, this old-time mountain music, but they also brought in blues and jazz that they incorporated to their songs, which would eventually give birth to the bluegrass sound. Now, there's been a lot of debate on when that birth actually happened. Some will say that it was in 1939 when the Bluegrass Boys got onto the old Grand Ole Opry stage, but others will argue that it was actually in 1945 when banjo player Earl Scruggs came into the group and brought with him his iconic banjo playing style, which all but solidified the prototype of what bluegrass sounds today. One thing to note, though, and it's one of these other misconceptions, is that this old-time mountain string band music and bluegrass music is the same. They're one and the same, and that's just not the case. There's actually a lot of differences and distinct differences between the two. For example, this old-time music was primarily played for dances, for square dances and hoedowns. And so the use of improvisation within that style of music was very limited. They wouldn't do it. But with bluegrass, Monroe would encourage his musicians to develop their own style of playing because they would cycle through each player and give them their own solo. And this is pretty conducive to the jazz sound that we do in jazz ensembles. Another difference was in the banjo itself. In the old time string band music, the banjo would play a two-finger claw style, right? And they did it because they were trying to create the rhythm that people would dance to. That was actually done with the banjo. But in bluegrass, they brought in this three-fingered style that Earl Scruggs brought, claim to fame was Earl Scruggs. They actually call it Scruggs-style banjo playing now, and they utilize that more in the music. So, but one of the biggest misconceptions that I want to get into is that either style of music is primarily associated with the white male. So bluegrass was in the making hundreds of years before its popularity in the early 40s. When Africans were sold as slaves, they brought over their own elements of their culture, and when that culture collided with that of the Scottish and the Irish culture, it was the making of this genre was set in motion. One of the most interesting aspects that was brought in from the African culture was actually the banjo. That is a central point in all of the string band music. And although the predecessor to the banjo, the African part of that was pretty primitive. It was just a gourd that was cut in half, and they would stretch an animal skin over that. It was the evolution of that from that instrument that brought forth the banjo as we know it today. The other piece that African brought in was their hymns, their style of singing that would be mainly religious based, but they brought that into this old time music, and it was majorly influencing the folk music of that time. Now, the Scottish and Irish did the same thing. They had their own aspects as well. They had a very distinct folk style that they brought in, and their style of fiddle playing, when fused with the African counterparts, is what established the most well-known American style music of today. So the thing about what, as history progressed, especially in the years coming up to the Civil War, the North was kind of making some changes, but the South was remaining the same, right? They were still stuck in this idea that there was this racial hierarchy that was going on. But even with that, in especially the rural Appalachian mountains, the poor whites and the slaves it was well known that they were actually intermingling and interacting with each other. And as we progressed in history, actually, let me go back. I changed that a little bit first. As we progressed in history, and after the Civil War, segregation was a major part of the South, but it was not absolute. And it is believed that the class distinctions was more influential than the racial distinctions, and they have evidence that blacks and whites in the cultural, in the economic standpoint, they integrated and they interacted with each other, not based as a different race type of group, but as one group altogether. And so if we start to focus on this idea that there was just one group, especially in the Appalachian Mountains, we can begin to understand that this influence that the music had was not one-directional. Yes, the whites were taking on the blues and the jazz into their repertoire of music, but the blacks were doing the same with this hillbilly mountain music. The banjo and the fiddle were actually prominent, very huge in the early blues. It was the instruments that they used in early blues. And it was not unheard of to see black musicians come into these square dances and hoedowns and actually play. A lot of the dance steps that were in these things were stemming from a mix of European dance steps, African dance steps, and actual Native American dance steps as well. And so one thing with Monroe would always talk about is he had this huge influence of a guy named Arnold Schultz. And he was saying that Arnold Schultz was a well-known blues guitarist and fiddle player at the time. And he was recollecting this time when he and Arnold would go into these square dances and these hoedowns, and they would start playing music from sun down, and they would not stop till sun up. So these last two samples of music that I gave you, those were actually full-on African-American mountain band players. So the thing that was going on with segregation at the time, they were actually told that they could not record because they were only allowed to play blues and jazz. But there was a numerous of them that really wanted to play the mountain music. And I've had a few quotes up here from Rhiannon Giddens, and she is a female musician, singer, songwriter in the string band arena that is trying to bring or educate people on the true history of this type of string band mountain music. And hopefully tonight, I have helped her in that education and gave you guys a deeper insight, a deeper understanding, and hopefully a deeper appreciation of bluegrass music. Because for me, music, whether the genre, no matter the genre, no matter where it comes from, it's going to spark some passion, some emotion inside of us. And every time I dig into the history of a band or a genre of music, I am reminded that it is music that will always transcend the woes of the world. Thank you. That's the Punch Brothers. Love that group. Questions? Wait, I have one back there.
So, bluegrass, the word bluegrass, where does that really come from?
So, it's a great question. So I told you that when Bill Monroe got started, he had the Bluegrass Boys, but it wasn't that music was not deemed bluegrass until many years later. They did not have a name for it. And so a lot of other bluegrass bands came up and said, well, Monroe started it. He's from Kentucky. His boys were the Bluegrass Boys. We'll just call it bluegrass. And so that's where the name came from. Go ahead. So it's a great question, but in the Appalachian, in the mountains, there wasn't, the poor whites were on the same economic level, so there wasn't a power aspect there. And this was what the beauty of what bluegrass was kind of happening, was there was a mutual exchange of this art form that they both loved. And so there wasn't a power balance at that point. Now, I'm not going to say that did not exist in the South, because it truly did. But there were groups and people. I mean, there was actually notations of people wanting to go to these hoedowns or these dances, and they wouldn't go because there was a black musician playing in there. But it was this idea that a lot of these musicians would come together and transcend over the idea that there wasn't power. We're just sharing music. We're just sharing our art form. Did that answer your question? Yeah. Right. No, I hear you.
I thought Bill Monroe was being lost in Indiana.
Bill Monroe was actually from Kentucky. I don't know the exact state, but you can go into his history, and he was born in Kentucky.
Lost It's just the grandfather of Bluegrass was probably not from Indiana, so I'm just trying to represent.
Oh, no, hey, represent. And like I told you in the beginning of this whole thing, I'm not a bluegrass guru. This is just the research. Because my dad was so much into history, the thing that really sparked us is cool, there's this aspect. What really got me was the banjo, right? Like, that's crazy that was an African instrument. So I really dove into it. And so everything that's out there brings Bill Monroe as the father of that. But I'm not going to say that I know everything about that. But hey, man, represent for sure. Yep.
Thank you, Garrett. All right, people, it's trivia time again with my lovely assistant, Mr. Flip. Let's see if this wants to work for me right now. Nope, nope, nope. Doesn't want to work. Doesn't want to work. I'm pressing buttons. Do, 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 do. Boop, boop, boop. Yes. Yes. There we go. All right, trivia time. So, next slide, sir. What planetary body was named after the Roman goddess of love? Yes. Woo! Venus. There we go. Next question. Every year, thousands of Valentine's cards are addressed to Juliet from the Shakespearean play, Romeo and Juliet. Which city are they sent to? Anyone? Anyone? Verona. Verona, Italy. Yes. Next question. Which popular entertainment website was founded on February 14th, 2005? No. No. Nope. Come on. Huh? No. It's entertainment. No. Yes! YouTube. YouTube. Yep. YouTube. All right. So we have one last short break before our final presenter, Mr. Michael, will give us an awesome presentation. So go ahead, refill your drinks, grab a couple more last bites, and we will meet you here in about 10 minutes.
All right. So we are approaching our last presenter of the evening. Let's see. Are we ready? All right. So with that, let's put our hands together and let's welcome Michael Bideau onto the stage, and he's going to tell us about the Garden of the Gods dinosaur and how you should actually pronounce it the right way.
Thank you. All righty. Wonderful, wonderful. Hello, everyone. My name is Mike Bideau. I am the education specialist at the Garden of the Gods Visitor Center. But before I get into this, I just want to tell you I was talking to my niece this afternoon before we were doing this, letting her know I was going to talk to a bunch of people about a dinosaur. And she went, "Uncle Mike, you got to tell them a dinosaur joke." And I said, "Sure. What should I say?" And she said, "Well, I've got the best dinosaur joke." Mind you, she's 6 years old. All right. She said, "Why did the dinosaur cross the road?" Why? Because it's a dinosaur. Gotta love 6-year-olds. They really know what they're talking about. Alrighty. So today, we are going to talk about the dinosaur called Theio cari. Theio cari means belonging to Garden of the Gods. Theo means belonging to the gods, and Vitalia means garden. And cari comes from the name of the geologist who did discover our lovely dinosaur, the Garden of the Gods. Now, I am not going to talk to you guys about the biological features of this dinosaur, the characteristics of the dinosaur, how it acted. That is not the point of this conversation tonight. Really what we're going to talk about is how we found this dinosaur, because it is a wild story, many twists, many turns, and we're going to go through the whole thing. So, to start, we have to go back to the first visitor center that we had at Garden of the Gods. It was there from 1997 to about 1994. In 1994, we knew that we were going to create a new visitor center. And so we were tasked with thinking of what could be our new exhibits in the new center. Well, our new center looks like this. If you're ever looking for something to do, definitely come to the Garden of Gods Visitor and Nature Center. Lovely place to be, mostly free, except for a donation for a movie if you're ever interested. So, in 1995, we had a park interpreter named Melissa Walker. And Melissa Walker was tasked with, like I said, trying to figure out a new exhibit for our visitor center. And she had heard rumors many, many years ago about a dinosaur fossil being found in our park, but there was no documentation about it. And so she set out on this journey of trying to find this weird dinosaur that may or may not have actually existed in Garden of the Gods. And her real question was, what was that dinosaur? Was it a T-Rex? Was it an iguanodon? Was it a triceratops? We had no idea at that time. So she reached out to this man that we see on the screen. His name is Kirk Johnson. Kirk Johnson is a Yale alumni. I'm going to need you to remember that because it's important for the story. Keep it in mind. He was a professor, not a professor, sorry. He was a researcher working at the Denver Museum of Natural Sciences. And so she reached out to him to be like, hey, is there any documentation you might have on this dinosaur that may or may not exist in Garden of the Gods? And he was like, wait, I may have heard of something. So he went back into the files and he ended up finding a document that did reference a fossil found in Garden of the Gods. And right here is that document. Boy, is that hard to read. I'll read for you. So, a second specimen, number 1887, in the Yale Museum, consisting of portions of the skull and lower jaw, was found in Garden of the Gods. It was collected by Professor O.C. Marsh from deposits in Garden of the Gods, Colorado Springs in 1886. With this specimen was found the following note in Professor Marsh's handwriting. Part of this animal and various sauropoda bones were taken out by Professor Kerr in 1878. Diligent inquiry failed to locate the repository of the parts of this specimen collected by Professor Kerr, but their association with sauropoda remains would indicate their Jurassic age. Let me just put that in normal people words. What this tells us is we found something. We don't know what it is, but it was nearby bones that should be Jurassic bones, so we're going to think it's a Jurassic type animal. That's really what we found. This gives us no information. We know something was there, so we had to go further. Luckily, we're going to go back in time to look at what Professor Kerr himself had to say. First of all, who is Professor Kerr? Professor Kerr, I will tell you this, did not care about his discovery. At all. I'm going to make that joke at least 10 times. So he was a Yale alumni. Remember, Yale, very important, Yale. He, after graduating Yale, moved out here to Colorado Springs and became a professor of chemistry and geology at Colorado College, where his main focus was really looking for natural gas, oil deposits, and mineral deposits in the area. Especially at that time, it was a newly settled area, and they were trying to find what precious metals they could mine out of the ground. In 1878, he was surveying Garden of the Gods for some reason. We honestly don't know. Why? Because Professor Kerr did not care about taking good notes. So, while he was there, he happened upon several fossils. Did he care about that? Again, he did not care. Seeing as he was a professor of chemistry and geology, that was not the point of his research. And this is early on in the discovery of dinosaurs. He really was not looking for them, and at that time, it wasn't a big deal to find a dinosaur. In fact, they even still referred to them as sea monsters at the time. So he really did not, yes, they were still sea monsters, and I will prove it with the next slide. And so he really did not have any want to worry about these fossils. So what he ended up doing is he had a friend named O.C. Marsh, who we're going to talk about in a moment, who he gave his fossils to. Let's look at his notes. The reason I really don't like care, and you might notice that because of how often I say he doesn't care, is not only did he not care about this dinosaur, these notes are atrocious. Look at that handwriting. Can you read that? No, but I have read it at least 10 times. So, here's what it says. In 1878, I discovered in the ridges east of the Red Rocks, forming the east boundary of Garden of the Gods, portions of 21 different sea monsters. Sea monsters. I told you, it's there. They did not believe in dinosaurs yet. That had been caught up in a basin in one of Earth's early paroxysms, which is an early term for Earth's layers. Later he goes on to say, most of the bones and some of the casks were boxed up for Colorado College. The college at that time, having no place to store such things, the boxes with the things were placed in barns and cellars, and and nearly all, thank you, and nearly all have been lost. So the man found 21 different fossils and did not care to put them in a place where he could find them again. What is that? Why are we naming a dinosaur after this man? It is beyond me. So, Professor Care, here's the important things to really take away from this, is that we actually don't know where our dinosaur came from, as he described it as being east of the Red Rocks, forming the eastern boundary of Garden of the Gods. If you've been to Garden of the Gods, most of the rocks are red. And if you go east of those rocks, that's just all of Colorado Springs. So, where was that dinosaur? We really, still to this day, have no idea. Terrible man, took terrible notes, no reason for a dinosaur to be named after him. But we are thankful for him for at least a little bit, because he did find this skull. And he ended up giving that skull to a man named O.C. Marsh. O.C. Marsh here is a Yale professor of paleontology. Yale, it's coming back. I promise, we're going to get to it. And he's an important man, especially when it comes to paleontology and dinosaurs. In fact, he was able to name over 80 dinosaurs in what we call the Dinosaur Wars, or the Bone Wars, which was those early years of dinosaur discovery, where paleontologists were trying to find as many dinosaurs as possible, getting the most names out there to have their names put up in lights and notoriety for the rest of eons. That was his whole goal. So he actually discovered a dinosaur called Camptosaurus, and that was in 1879. Camptosaurus is a Jurassic dinosaur, bird-beaked, sort of like an iguanodon, but not an iguanodon, because those did not yet exist. He found that dinosaur in 1879. Later, like I said, Care gives him those fossils he found at Garden of the Gods. That happens in 1886. When he finally gets a hold of that skull, he thinks that it's also a Camptosaurus. That our dinosaur in Garden of the Gods was that Camptosaurus. In fact, he was so sure that it was a Camptosaurus that he used that skull as the index fossil, the distinguishing fossil, to be in his textbook of how to identify fossils. This is his drawing of a Camptosaurus. This is the skull found in Garden of the Gods that they used for over 100 years to identify other Camptosauruses. Camptosauri, Camptosauruses, whatever that may be. But he was wrong. He was wrong. But again, he was so sure. After he finished his textbook, finished his drawings, he shipped the skull fossil back to Yale to their Peabody Museum, where it was logged as YPM 1887, where it lived in obscurity for about 130 years. Thank you to those of us who know the Ark of the Covenant. But that's not where this story ends, obviously. It picks back up in 1996. Like I told you in the beginning, Melissa Walker here was a park interpreter at the time who was looking for information on our dinosaur. Like I said, Kirk Johnson, that lovely Yale alumni, was able to find some information about something. Here's what happened. we're back to the Yale thing. Because he's a Yale alumni, he was able to call up Yale and say, hey, you got this fossil that was from Colorado Springs. Can I see it? Can I borrow it? Can I use it? And Yale was like, sure, you're an alumni. Thank goodness, we'll give it to you. Had he not been a Yale alumni, we probably would have never found this dinosaur. So thank you, Yale, for this one thing. Kirk Johnson, shade. Kirk Johnson was actually tasked with hand delivering this skull from Yale all the way to Denver. So that meant in 1996, he took the skull, the real skull, not a cast, onto a plane as his carry-on and sat it in his lap on the way to Denver. Imagine taking a skull through TSA right now. I mean, like, how do you explain that? So he gets back to Denver with it, but here's the thing. Kirk Johnson, while he was a paleontologist, really was an expert in mollusks, clams and snails and things. He was not really big into sauropods, dinosaurs, large vertebrae. That's where Ken Johnson gets involved. And Ken Johnson is another colleague who works at the Denver Museum of Natural Sciences. He gave the skull to Ken as a favor and asked, can you make sure this is the dinosaur it is? And Ken said, sure. And he did a preliminary search, but again, keep in mind, it was a favor. This man has so many other things to do. He's got research papers and grants and deadlines and things. So he looked at the skull for a second and was like, yeah, totally, Camptosaurus, go for it. So we thought it was a Camptosaurus. Kirk Johnson then did make 2 casts of that Camptosaurus skull. One of them is up in Denver at that museum. The second one is here in Colorado Springs at the Garden of the Gods Visitor Center. You'll see it right here. Listen, Melissa Walker is living my dream. She got to have the cast of a real dinosaur skull in her home. I mean, how cool is that? I mean, she earned it. She totally earned it. But because of the fact that we found our Camptosaurus, we decided we were going to celebrate it. And when our new visitor center was built, we had this mural on the other side commissioned to put up in our center. And you can see, let's see if I can do the red, yeah. You can see right here, that is a blue dinosaur. It is a Camptosaurus that we named Campy. He's still there now. If you ever go, he's still up in that mural because we wanted to pay homage to that dinosaur. It wasn't that big of a deal at the time because a Camptosaurus is a pretty common Jurassic dinosaur. But all things must come to an end. See, Campy lived at our visitor center for about 10 years when they first got him there. And he was actually our mascot for a minute, included in the Junior Ranger books. There were plenty of things that you could buy at the gift shop that had him on it. But again, we were wrong. See, we're going to go back to Ken Johnson. Ken Johnson here, like I said before, looked at the skull as a favor. 10 years later, he finally had some time. It takes 10 years to finally have time. And he's like, maybe I should look at that skull again. It looked a little odd. It didn't look like the other Camptosauruses I've seen. So he took the skull back out, and he did a preliminary search again, and was like, this ain't right. So looking here, we have a picture of what a Camptosaurus actually looks like, and this is a picture of our dinosaur, Garrett of the Gods. You'll notice a few major dissimilarities. One, the nostril is a wildly different size. 2, the eye socket is much larger on a Camptosaurus than it is on our dinosaur. And the third and most important piece of evidence is that they found that the sediments on the skull from Garden of the Gods were Cretaceous, not Jurassic. Now, the Camptosaurus did not exist in the Jurassic era. Therefore, that skull could not be a Camptosaurus. So what is it? And that actually became Ken Johnson's major research for about an entire year. And in 2007, him and his assistants were able to announce at the visitor center that it is not a Camptosaurus that we found. It is actually our own unique dinosaur that had never been found before. So YPM 1887 is actually what we now call Theio Caryi. But it doesn't just end there. See, Theio is the lowest dinosaur on this planet, for she is the only one we've ever found, and we've only ever found portions of her skull. And so while we do love her, and she is very important to us, please come to the visitor center, come see her. She's there, as well as this lovely recreation of her. She is lonely and has no one else. Really what I want you guys to take away from this story is, not necessarily that we found a cool dinosaur, yes, we love that, but what I want you to take away is that science is an ever-changing thing. It's not like scientists just find out information and insert facts into some fact library somewhere. What we do is when we find new information, we re-examine our prior conclusions to figure out if there's something new and different. And that's exactly what this story is. Had nobody questioned what this animal was, we would have never known. Had Melissa Walker never looked at a rumor about a dinosaur, we would have never found this. Had Kirk Johnson not been from Yale, we would have never found this dinosaur. But the point is that science is not static. We should not think that science is static. It's ever changing. Thank you all. Does anyone have any questions about our friend Theio? It's okay if we don't. Oh, hey! Can you say that again? How did I find out about Theio? Well, I started this job about 4 months ago. And when you walk in, they give you a bunch of paperwork about the history of Garden of the Gods. In fact, I definitely have the pamphlet in my coat jacket about Theio right now. So Theio, she's a big deal in our center. She has her own special center, and she is our mascot. You can find her in many of our things. Go ahead. How do you take a skull and guess what the body looks like? Fun fact, I just did this with some kids yesterday, so this works out. So the reason why we have an idea of what the body looks like, this is obviously not concrete, but the reason that we have an idea as to what the body looks like is we base it off of other creatures that it may or may not look like, things that it's related to. So Theio is actually in the iguanodon family. It is not the iguanodon that we all think of, but it is very similar, and so we based her body structure off of the basic iguanodon. Go ahead.
Still like a lonely dinosaur, or have you found any other?
So Rose asked if she's still a lonely dinosaur, and unfortunately she is. The closest thing to a friend she has is one of the park rangers at Garden of the Gods named her dog, Gieo Pensoneault. So that is like the second one, sure. But no, she is completely the only specimen that has ever been found. And like I said before, we never even really found out where that skull was found. So it's not even like we can go looking in those areas to try to find another piece of information. Did dinosaurs mate with other dinosaurs? Are you saying like cross species? I mean, probably. I mean, let's be honest here. Let's be honest here. If we look at biology, we see that happen today. Ligers, mules, etc. But most likely, if we're talking about an evolutionary Darwinism standpoint on this, she probably was doing her own, just with her own species. Doesn't mean she didn't. Who knows? Theo can do what she wants. Oh, one more. Is one more? Okay, one more. Oh, how do I know her pronouns? Because all dinosaurs in the park are female. Do we get that? Jurassic Park. All the dinosaurs in the park are female. That's what it is. Awesome. Thank you all.
Thank you. Yes. Awesome. Thank you so much, Michael. That was amazing. I enjoyed that very much so. And I have been to the Garden of the Gods Visitor Center quite a few times, but now I need to go again so I can give Theo a proper visit. So now there's some closing items for tonight. Unfortunately, it is time. Next Nerd Night at Coati on this very stage. You can grab your free tickets tonight, Wednesday, March 16th. So put it on your calendars. Do not forget. Oh, yes, that's right. So on this day, we're going to have an official announcement for another event that we are doing. So it's going to be big, 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 big. It's going to be fun. So there's that. And keep on the lookout. Look at our socials, at our Facebook, at our Instagram. Send a message to us if you want to speak at one of our events. That would be amazing. I know you guys want to do that. Presenting ideas. There you go. You see, I'm ahead of myself. And Flip and I, we host another amazing community building event that's free and fun. It's called Memoirs, True Stories Unfiltered. It's a true storytelling event. It's held on the last Monday of every month. And this month, the theme is What's Love Got to Do With It? And it is at 3E's Comedy Club here in downtown, a couple blocks away, so it's not too far. So if you scan your phone camera on that, you'll be able to get your free tickets there as well. Put that on your calendar, and that is all. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming out, giving us your time and attention. I appreciate it. Until next time, ciao.